We'll just give them a second while we get everybody loaded in here. Just take a few seconds.
Doesn't take that long when I'm the guest, Carl.
Hey everybody, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books. We're gonna get going here in just a moment as people start joining. Actually, we'll go now. Thank you all for joining our virtual author event series, which we have been doing for a little over a year now, and we've done about 150 of these virtual events in that time and talked to—
He's bragging.
well, you know, humble brag, I think is what they call it. But it's been a pretty amazing way to stay connected with all of you guys and meet new people and you know, kind of have a tether to an audience beyond Tulsa, beyond Oklahoma, and sometimes even outside the country. So this new technological realm we're living in has been, you know, quite a benefit for us in that way. But we do look forward to getting back to in-person things. We're going to try maybe some outdoor things this summer and see how that's going, and kind of ease our way back into that. A lot of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. I would encourage you guys to check our website, magiccitybooks.com. You can see all the things. We have everything from, you know, conversations with Chris Matthews and Don Lemon from CNN to Kevin Kwan, who wrote Crazy Rich Asians, as a new book out. We're going to be talking with him. So kind of all over the map. And of course, I would say a lot of things that at the end of this month, we'll be commemorating the centennial of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre here in Tulsa. And there will be a lot of programming around that. So I would encourage you guys to check out the website and do that. Really excited tonight. When I was, I think 2008 is when I last met this gentleman, Ridley Pearson. He came to Tulsa for one of his, what we call adult novels, although it's not that kind of adult novel.
No,
but
that would be Carl's realm.
Yeah, exactly. He came here and we had a blast. But we haven't had him back since then, and it's been such a pleasure to have him, because also I get to be an audience member like you. And if you don't know Ridley's work, he's written upwards of 50 books for both young readers and for adults. #1 New York Times bestseller, and there is a long-awaited book coming out that's been bumped more times than the sequel to Top Gun.
Than a basketball.
Yeah. And it's going to be coming out next spring. It'll be part of the series, the Kingdom Keeper series that Ridley's been working on. So check out that. But Ridley will be leading our conversation tonight. Could not be more thrilled about that. I was telling Ridley before we came on here, I first read Carl Hiaasen when I was 13 years old.
I told him not to say that, Carl.
I know, but I had to do it. But what I remember so distinctly was it was striptease, of course, and I remember
your parents.
I don't know. Good question. You know, it was the poor parenting, but it was such a great book. No pictures, of course, but I remember opening the book, and I knew from the first moment there's a disclaimer in the book, if I remember correctly. And, you know, you're used to reading these things that this is not based on, you know, real people or whatever. And then it has this great line. Carl, I don't know if you remember what this line was, but, you know, it entered about, I think it was about alligator wrestling, I believe. And
oh, no, it was about the wrestling and the cream corn, which
wrestling and cream corn.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And
that was true. Yeah.
And you know what's so funny about that is it kind of set the tone for me for enjoying all these books all these years later. And it was like, this is someone different. And
you think?
Yeah. Different, like the Randy Newman song, right? And so it's been such a great journey over these last, you know, many years reading all of Carl's books, and also got kind of that anticipation, you know, when you get excited about that next book. And Squeeze Me, talk about a timely book, and really we'll be getting into that with Carl tonight. All of you guys have a copy of that. I hope you've read it already. If not, we probably will not do spoilers tonight or give any of those things away. But if you haven't read the book yet, you'll.
But it's out in paperback.
You'll have a great time. It's out in paperback. You guys all have a copy of it. Thank you for buying a ticket and getting a book. But just so thrilled to have Carl Hiaasen. Now, one thing before you guys start, I'm confused about the makeup of the Rock Bottom Remainders. All right. So this is the famous band that.
So are we.
Yeah. So Ridley, I know you are kind of an official member, correct?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a founding member, but that really means that's probably a disqualifier.
Yeah, but Carl, are you a member or are you kind of like a Neil Young, like CSNY?
That's
Right?
right.
He's a member.
I'm the Y. Yeah. Every few years, actually, it was years the last time between them when then I have to relearn 3 guitar chords and I get up on stage with them for a while. But no, I'm not Dave Barry would be the first to tell you that I'm just, I tag along on occasion, but I'm not. Ridley's an actual musician. I can't.
No, that's plausible deniability because Carl is absolutely a member. In fact, the very most recent time we've played, I think, since all of this crazy pandemic, we renamed the band.
Yeah,
and we're not going to go there, but we all had shirts. We all wore shirts with Carl's name on it. And I won't say anything more than that because we would get off the air if this is FCC monitored.
Even Zoom would kick us off.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well,
or
anyway,
the internet.
I'm so thrilled to have both of you here. Ridley, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you, Carl,
Thanks.
for doing this.
Thanks, Jeff, for hosting us.
Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody for showing up. I'm Ridley, that's Carl. And because of the band and my friendship with Dave Barry, I've known Carl for a couple decades now. And, we run into each other every few years. And I think he knows what a major fan I am of his work. So it's both a thrill and an honor when I get a chance to talk to him. Because you are a total goofball, Carl, but you're also one of the more brilliant goofballs I know. You guys can, I'm told that there's a little thing at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. Now that might stand for question and answer. So if you have questions, I have my little Q&A window open and please just write a question and I'll stop the nonsense that I'm doing and get to the more intelligent questions that you guys are asking. Carl, I wanted to lead off. First, I love every page of Squeeze Me. I hope to get into this later, but I really don't know. I've read so many of your books and I just don't know exactly how you can keep doing this. And you do it and you don't repeat yourself. And even in my little world, when I'm writing for kids and stuff and I'm writing for Kingdom Keepers, I have to fight like mad not to slip into something I've already done without knowing it, and be reading a chapter in a proofread or something and go, oh my gosh, I think that's like book 5. But you're so good at keeping these things crazily original. In your columns,
that's because I'm not very prolific like you.
Well, you are. No, you've done, and you write for young readers too, and very successfully, more successfully than mine.
That's the scary part is they let me write for young readers.
Are you writing any more of those, by the way?
That's what I'm working on now. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, those are fantastic too. And you had the brilliance to name most of them, to title them with one word. That's much easier to remember than my titles, which have like a title, a subtitle, and then a book number. It's like these guys have to remember an encyclopedia.
Yeah, yours are elaborate, and your
I know.
Don't have any.
I like one word.
But I started doing it because all the adult novels that I was writing, they had 2-word titles. That's what published and I started doing. So the last thing I wanted was a young reader getting confused between a book meant for young readers and a book, where you have naked people wrestling in cream corn. I felt that I had to set them apart, and that's how the sort of the 1-word title started. I think,
you're giving them a lot of credit, Carl.
Well, it was my own conscience. It was my own lapsed Catholic conscience that I couldn't do it. But Squeeze Me was different because it was a moving target. It was there's a president in the novel who somewhat resembles the 45th.
Somewhat.
Yeah. But so every day
you didn't have to get permission for that, Carl.
Every day was a competition between what I could come up with and what the real life headlines were, and that was the hard part for me, was staying ahead of the weirdness and the lunacy, even as it unspooled.
So you deal with corruption, you deal with the environment, you deal with animal rights in so many of your books. Immigration in this one, I think, in a really great way, honestly. Do you start with that as an intended target? What is it? I'm
Yeah.
waiting for your readers to ask same questions. I just am always interested in process. So I'm just sort of curious, where does a squeeze me start in the brain of Carl Hiaasen?
Well, we were living through a very turbulent time, even before COVID, and luckily, because of the way that compression of time happened after that, I was able to get even the pandemic into this book, because
I know, I saw that.
The deadline got pushed back so much. But I usually start with a cast of characters, and I'm usually angry about something. I mean, I think most people who write satire, if they're honest, will admit to being angry, going back to Jonathan Swift, although I wouldn't put myself in that category, but
you should.
Mark Twain was a pretty grumpy dude.
Yeah.
He wasn't celebrating the ascent of the human race at all.
Right.
And I don't either. And that's just from a background in the newspaper business for all these years. So I started with kind of a cast of characters and a loose plot. In this case, also because I'm not, obviously not a well person. And I've been trying to work the pythons in, because as you know from your visits to Florida, these Burmese pythons that have sort of taken over the Everglades and are popping up in suburban backyards and swimming pools, and even in some ladies' washing machine. They're a real deal, and they get huge. And they are a real deal. They are a serious creature down here. So when in my case, if I was at the Hollywood pitch, I would have said giant pythons, Mar-a-Lago, and that would have been the whole pitch.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was irresistible to me, the idea, because they are moving north. They'll get to the island of Palm Beach eventually. And I kind of wrote this book. I wrote this book for people who couldn't be there when it happened.
I like that. You're getting a question from John, who says, you've targeted 45. What about the current governor? And where did you get your roadkill governor?
Well, that's a lot of the current governor. Obviously, I stopped writing the newspaper column. I'd written it for years and years. I stopped in March.
Was that last fall? Oh, last spring.
Just in March. I just stopped in March. But of course, I'd written about DeSantis, and I've written, and since then it's just gotten sillier and more absurd. And he'll be around for the future. I don't see him as a character in a novel. I mean, he's not that all that colorful, but he bears watching for all Americans, because some of the stuff that's happening in Florida is pretty alarming. But the character who also appears in Squeeze Me, that the question referred to, is known as Skink, and he's in my world, he's a former governor who just went crazy in Tallahassee because of all the corruption, and many years ago disappeared into this. He ripped his clothes off and ran out of the governor's mansion and was never seen again. And now he lives off roadkill. And he's been in several of the novels. Always he sort of wanders on at a certain time when
he's kind of tangential, yeah. But I am a definite skankhead. Every time he shows up, I jump up and down and cheer.
He wasn't modeled on any. I tell people, I wish there was someone in real life politics that I could have modeled him on, but he wasn't. He was
so glad that's true, though.
He was just supposed to be a walk-on in a book that I wrote back in, I don't want to say 87, I think, called Double Whammy. Yeah. And he was really just supposed to be around for a couple of chapters. And you've had this experience, and this is the great thing about our job. One of the great luxuries we have is when we get happily surprised by characters. It's more often when you create a character and you think it's going to be a great character, and then it's awful and boring, and you got to get rid of them. This was one of those. Skink was one of those characters that he's all of a sudden took over the page, and I sort of couldn't wait to see what he was going to do. And that happens once in a while, and because it's our book, so we can do whatever we want. If we want to leave him around till the end of the book, we can do that.
With a guy like Skink, did you know that after writing like 2 paragraphs? Or did you not, when did it dawn on you that this guy was an indelible? I mean, I think so many of us associate him with you.
By the end of that chapter that he was in, where I was looking, I needed a hermit guy. It sounds like central casting, but in the plot of the novel, I needed a hermit guy. And I gave him this backstory of having an ex-governor who just went crazy. And then by the end of that chapter, I introduced him. He was so interesting, and he was saying things that I always wished I could say, and he was getting away with things that I always wished I could get away with. So I think by then I knew that he was going to be at least have a bigger part in that particular book. And at the end of it, usually I'm pretty much through with the characters. I don't have the discipline to have a recurring protagonist. I think it takes a real discipline to do that. And I don't have it. I get bored. I always want to start with a new cast, but he's been, to me, somebody who's worth bringing back.
He's iconic. The other thing you got some good marketing with him, because I'm sure this is true of everybody on here. Every single time for the last 30 years or whatever it's been that I pass roadkill, it's always next to a forest or woods, and you think of that character every stinking time.
Well, here's what the idea that of someone who lives on roadkill, and again, he was definitely going to appear. I know it sounds pretty perverse, but I had gotten that idea, like you probably do in the old days when you clipped out newspaper stories and you didn't get everything online. I clipped out. It was from either an Audubon magazine or the Smithsonian magazine. Something had a funny story about a state trooper, and I think it was Pennsylvania, who they called Officer Roadkill, because every time anything died on the highway, they'd call him and he would show up and he would take it home. And he had a walk-in freezer, and he made use of every single part of the roadkill. He ate it, or he did something, he made pelts. So I thought that's a really interesting hobby.
That's insane.
Yeah. And then
I'm glad I didn't know that all these years.
But here's the downside, is that once you open the Pandora's box of roadkill anecdotes from readers, you get mail that you can't unread once you've read it about their own personal roadkill experiences. And if the fan base that you get is sketchy, because there are people that actually do this stuff. Now, you can't see it. There's a sculpture right there, and that a friend of mine who's a dentist in Big Pine Key, and it's a roadkill sculpture.
Oh,
and
my
I had seen him some of his artwork, and I thought it was incredible that he would, and so I said, you know what, I wouldn't mind it if you made something out of a raccoon. I like raccoons, and I said, if the occasion arises. So he sent out like an APB in the Keys for a roadkill raccoon. And I don't know if you know much about the process of becoming roadkill, but usually there's an impact with the bumper that it's pretty much useless after that. Well, he found one where the skull was intact. So that's a raccoon skull, and one other body part of a raccoon that I will not tell you what it is, because I didn't.
You didn't even know.
You could get, well, actually, the sad thing is I was aware you can actually buy them on Amazon. I'm not lying.
Oh, Carl.
I'm not lying about that. It's a great country. Go online and buy the penis of almost any mammal that you want. And it's legal with raccoons, sadly, by the way. There's nothing, apparently it's not.
I had no clue that existed. I'm ending this conversation.
The only thing, you can't get them on Prime, apparently, according to my friends. But anyway,
you gotta pay for the shipping.
Yeah, let me just say the sculpture is complete in ways that I really didn't ask it to be complete.
Well, speaking of your office there, we're getting a question about Warren Zevon being over your shoulder, which is and something we can both talk about. That
laminate is a backstage laminate from my friend and yours, because he played with the Remainders, Warren Zevon.
3 years, yeah, 3 years.
That's his famous skull emblem. It's called Old Velvet Nose, and he had it, and you can't see, but one of his guitars is hanging right there, a Gibson.
Oh man, you guys were dear friends.
That he left me when he passed away. It's the guitar he played in. Often in concert. Now he played a different one on the recordings, the acoustic. But anyways, so that's I'm amazed, because I've done a lot of these Zooms, and I've been waiting for someone to say that. Is that a Zevon laminate?
Well, you got it from Lori McGinnis Madland. Well done, Lori.
Yeah.
Hooray.
That's
Spotted
great.
it immediately. I mean, that thing popped up like, we went on the air, boom.
Yeah,
Lori was
that's
going, is that
yeah,
a Warren Zevon something or other?
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
that's pretty great.
Yeah.
How, since we're on the subject of skink, is there? We're being asked by Stephen if there's another skink novel in the works. Will he be back? Is he going to show up?
You
Does
know,
he just appear by accident?
I never know. This is the truth, and this is gonna. This shows you how disorganized I am. I have no idea when I start a book whether there's going to be a moment for him or not. In this particular novel, I don't want to give anything away, but let me just say, I needed someone who was reptile friendly, and who was let me
You
just
got Angie, man. Angie.
comfortable among large reptiles. So I didn't really have anybody in the bag. Angie, I love because
Where'd she come from? Where the
I'll
heck
tell,
did
I'll tell you where she goes.
Yeah.
She's the protagonist of the novel, and she's
Right.
an animal wrangler, which we have in South Florida because the state has grown so fast, and there's so much interaction with what wild creatures are left. In almost every county, there's a couple of businesses where if you come home and there's a possum in your garage or an armadillo in your piano, you call somebody and the truck shows up and they got cute little markings on it, and someone professional goes in and gets the animal alive and takes them somewhere and lets them go. And they, of course, alligators, but all kinds of stuff. So Angie, a friend of mine, I know a little bit about the business, so I got the idea that it would be a cool. When I started that character, I wrote about 5 chapters with the main character being male, being a guy, because it's a business that's pretty much dominated by men, the animal wrangling business in Florida. But I thought, then I got into it, that it could be a really cool character as a woman doing this and getting called out to these scenes. I mean, they get skunk calls, they get a lot of snake calls, but the point is there's a lot of people in Florida that freak out if they see a big snake, or if there's if a raccoon comes at them, they freak out. And so these people that run these businesses do very well because they get called on all this cool stuff. So I just thought it'd be a neat main character for her to have. She's an
amazing main character. You love her. I was never quite sure what she looked like in my head. There were times I saw her one way, and then I would suddenly, when we got into the khaki phase, I started seeing her as more good looking and gorgeous than I had earlier imagined her. So she's a fun character because she morphs around in your head.
Right, and she's small. She's petite. So
yeah, she is small. Yeah,
when she shows up with her animal noose, a lot of them have these nooses.
I love that.
But they're live catch nooses, and you just got to know how to. If you got a bobcat on the end of it, you better know what you're.
And if you had a person,
well, yeah,
if you had a person, you'd have to know what you were doing.
And she does, and she ends up having to use all her skill set.
Yes, she does.
During the course of it, but she had been a game warden and had gotten fired from the state as a fish and game officer I won't give anything away, and so she had sort of ended up in this particular business, and she's single and she's petite, but it's also a line of work where you don't show up often in a gown. She gets to at some point, but you're showing up to wrestle some critters,
some mean things.
You need the khakis, and the scary thing is, I think there's a possum scene in the book where she gets has to tangle with a possum in somebody's attic or something. Right. I'm probably one of the few, I bet I'm the only member of the Rock Bottom Remainders who had a possum as a pet when I was young.
That would be for certain. I'm almost certain.
I think I don't think even Stephen King had a pet possum.
No, he might have had a boa, but not a possum.
So this is a body of knowledge that I can mine.
Yeah. So someone's asking, they said, which I think is a high compliment, that your work reminds them of Tom Robbins.
Oh, wow.
And are you a fan?
I am. It's with satire and humor, especially sort of Americana.
Right.
It's funny, really, that all the years are, and I think there's a lot to write about if you, especially if you have sort of a social conscience, as satirists do, and you know, we come from different eras, obviously, but I mean, in my case, I think one of the biggest influences on me when I was young was Joseph Heller when I read Catch 22.
Oh my gosh, I got to meet him.
Did you really? I never
Yeah, I
did.
got to meet him. I was at Oxford for a year, and he came over to lecture.
Yeah, I mean,
It was really an amazing moment because he's just, I mean, you know, so much of his work is now in our language. It's just crazy.
right. And I remember when I read Catch 22, and my dad, of all people, who's, you know, really a conservative dude and a lawyer and all this stuff, but he said, you gotta read this book, and to read about war, you know, the grimmest of all
The
human
grimmest of all.
experiences,
Yeah.
and to be laughing aloud on almost every page because
Yeah.
how artfully he was writing about way more than that. But at the time, you go, got it, World War II, and it isn't. But it sort of opened
Catch 22.
the torch of, you know, the possibilities of what you can do, you know,
Yeah.
with the written word, and how you can channel strong feelings about things you care about, and how you can work all that in without being pedantic, without clubbing people over the head, and that you know that the trick was, as you know, is to get people laughing for the right reason.
Yeah, but let's go there for a minute, because I think it's the if not one of, maybe the hardest thing to write humor.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have a funny bone and be able to have decent timing, or you know, a funny story to tell or something, but so much of that is pausing, and you know, like you and Dave are experts at giving the right hesitation, like when you give a public speech or something, there's just that moment where you'll stop and let the whole audience fall into your pocket. But doing it on paper is so difficult. Well, and I don't honestly know how you do it, because but maybe you could talk about that a little, because I really think I don't think you could ever teach it. Yeah, I mean, you either have it or you don't have it. But I would love to be funny on paper, but I just can't make it land. You can make those jokes, and I don't even know if it's fair to call them jokes, but they're either situational, or they're funny sentences, or it's just the way that somebody handles something so differently than you laugh. But it's is there any way to explain how you do that?
You know, it's hard, and Dave and I have talked about it, because that's his great genius. And the difference, one difference, is that if you're writing, whether it's satire or any kind of a comic moment, and this is true if you're doing stand-up as well, which I've never done, but I've done enough public speaking. So, but you can be off. You can have one adjective wrong. You can have a comma in the wrong place, delivery of a, and then it falls flat. And one of the reasons I think that both of us sort of look like we're in agony when we're writing is because you're conscious just of the beat of the phrase, but also of how important every word has to be to make it absolutely right. And I don't mean to diminish it by this comparison, but if you watch good monologues, I grew up watching Johnny Carson, who had this great timing. And for a while when I was a kid, I thought it'd be cool to grow up and try to write jokes for Johnny Carson. But what you learn from that is that every word, everything that went into every word, when a joke fell flat, it was usually because of one word or one turn of phrase. So when you're sitting, and it's a high wire act, because you want people to be turning the pages of a book because it's suspenseful as well, and there's a story, and also because they care about the characters, but they also want to laugh. And so, and I know that from a fact that when I'm sitting there working, and I can write a scene in my head, I mean, as I'm writing a section, and I know instinctively that something's funny, that line is funny, or that bit of dialogue works. but I'm not smiling when I write it, and I'm
Huh.
not laughing at all. And Dave told me the same thing. You don't laugh at your own stuff because you're going over it so many times. Is it right? Is it perfect? Then you have a little voice that says that's right, and you move on. But it's not like you're slapping your own knee and saying, God, I'm a funny son of a bitch. It's just
Is
the
that
opposite.
right?
It's the opposite. It's
So you work that stuff to death, huh?
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I
It
probably,
reads effortless. I guess that's the amazing thing about it is that certainly
well,
I wouldn't, and I know Dave does the same thing. Dave Barry, he labors over every single word. I mean, it might take him 3 hours to write a paragraph.
oh,
But
I've done this.
when it's done, it's done. He doesn't really rewrite it because he spent 3 hours writing it.
And he knows and you do know the moment
Do you know? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the other thing is we're horribly tough on ourselves. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if readers appreciate it. You're the same way. You become perfectionist. It's
Right.
great, and I've had good editors, great editors. All mine have been, and I haven't had many, but they've been terrific, and they're usually right. But they're never, I don't think, as hard on myself as I am.
Yeah.
I cling to these manuscripts. I'm clawing at it on its way before I hit the send button. No, wait, I can do. And there are times I've awakened in the middle of the night thinking about a line I wrote during the day, where I'll just say, no, that was the wrong word. Why did I use that word? And then the next morning, the first thing I'll do is I'll call it up and I'll find that sentence and go fix the sentence. But I don't mean to be obsessive about it, but I think that's what
you can't help it.
That's what writers do.
Yeah, I have those editors that literally have to say, okay, send it now.
Right.
Stop.
Yeah.
Send it now. But I'm more of a rewriter than a slow writer as I go. So I end up doing a bunch of drafts and eventually somebody says, just send the thing. You've got a question here about, are you still reading humor and satire?
I do when I can. When I was doing the column, even though it was only once a week, I have to say I didn't do much outside reading. And if I have a novel going, what I'm usually trying to read is nonfiction. And I do that because I don't want to subconsciously infect anything I'm writing with somebody else's ideas. Things that stick in your brain that you don't even understand are sticking in your brain. And then, so I distanced myself from that. But I read, when certain novelists come out, I read everything that Martin Amis writes. Gary Steinhardt is fantastic. Karen Russell is mind-bogglingly good. But the shame of it is that, you get behind if you, especially
you do.
And you're writing all the time.
Because you're writing all the time, yeah. I get stacks,
You get stacks of these things. I don't know how you feel about it, Ridley, but after a day of writing, sitting there and beating yourself up and just trying to get a good half a chapter or a good 500 words down, I come home and I got to say the last thing I want to do is pick up a galley.
That's my problem, Carl.
It may be brilliant, but I
want to turn on Netflix, man.
That's what my brain.
I just want to go somewhere else.
I just want. I'll sit and I'll watch a Schitt's Creek episode that I've seen 10 times.
Exactly.
Because I'm just, your own brain is fried, and I don't know whether it's a function of age. But I remember when I was young, I felt the same. I was just because I worked at the newspaper all day, and then I go home at night and work on the novels at night. I didn't have time to read a postcard.
Yeah. I wonder if that's where some of your specificity of word choice comes from as journalism, because with your columns, are you assigned inches and all of that kind of thing where it has to be a certain length, and you've got to learn how to write really concisely and specifically? I mean, being never having done that, I can just sort of go wild and fix it all later. But I think you, and I've heard Dave say this too, that it's all about focus, because it has to be so exact to please the editor and get the right length and all that.
Not only that, but you have to learn, and you do this even when I was reporting and doing, the stories and even magazine stories, which are quite long, you still have to know how to write a beginning, a middle, and then
That's right.
an ending. And you've got to keep readers into it. So if you write, let's say my column was usually about 750 words, but that has a built-in rhythm to it. And you also, you know, there's gonna, here's the opening and here's the end. You know, you had to already be constructing that in your mind. So it's a good discipline. It's a good muscle to work. And if you do other kinds of writing, it's the same thing. You know, you keep it moving. You know, you can't. The great sin. You know, the worst sin is boring people. That's the worst sin.
Yeah, no kidding. You're right. I want. We've got a couple more questions, but I'd just selfishly, because you mentioned editors, I'd love to know about your relationship with Sonny Mata.
Oh my God!
You've been with him for a long time, right? Are you still with him? Is he still? Did he retire, or is he
no?
Still going?
He actually passed away in December.
Oh, I did not know that, Carl.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Well, we'd started.
That's a loss to the publishing industry, man.
Yeah,
he was an icon.
We'd started. You know, obviously he'd been working with me on Squeeze Me, and then he got sick at the end of December. It was not this December. It was before it was
19.
Of
I never
COVID,
heard. Oh, that's
right
just
before
awful.
COVID. But Sonny was, of course, one of the most elegant and urbane, and so I got a surprise call and said, you know, that he'd been working in England and he had I think read Double Whammy. I couldn't even imagine him reading a book about corruption on the bass fishing circuit. If you meet this guy, I mean, there's no way he read, but he had. And when he came to Knopf, I think it was 91 or something, he asked me to meet with him and Esther. And I remember, I'll tell a Sonny story quickly, but went up to his offices at Random House and it was like 10 in the morning, right? And my agent Esther Newberg and I are sitting there, and there's Sonny's there, and there's a bottle of Scotch open. He's got a little glass, and he's just sitting there looking. And he had the best line. I said, "Look, I said, I'm really flattered that you would, but I write some really." I said, I don't write anything that you could put in any category. And he said, if you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Oh.
So I was at that point. I was done, and he was my editor for all those years on the Grown Up books. And then when he passed away suddenly, Peter Gathers, who was a terrific editor I'd worked with on some nonfiction books, he took over and we finished I finished the writing and the editing of Squeeze Me with Peter.
Oh, great. Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
You have both a celebratory and a question of a bit. I think I'll just read it as a piece because it's terrific. It's from Kate, and she says, I recently read your last editorial for the Miami Herald. The US especially needs voices and brains like yours to digest, interpret, and share opinion of what's going on in our nation and world with intelligence and honesty. If you're no longer writing your column, do you have plans to write a nonfiction /editorialist book? And thanks, Kate, for that question.
Thank you very much. I don't have any plans to do that. I strongly suspect that if I will, and I have opportunities, if I want to write columns about things and continue in that vein, I would. Not a whole book, but I certainly am not going to shut up about what's going on. And I think at this point I'm basically taking some breathing, a little breathing room, but
sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to get that out of your blood. And I wrote the column, I think almost 35 years for the Herald, and I was with the paper for almost 45 years. And it's really hard to turn the faucet off. But on the other hand, there was a certain level of exhaustion that I think a lot of people have felt, not just writers, not just journalists.
Yeah, no, the whole world.
Country.
Yeah.
To the turmoil, the political turmoil, and then the pandemic on top of it. And I think I think it's not a bad thing to step back and take a breath. But no, it's flattering, but a nonfiction book might require something like an outline or something. And Yeah,
Heavens, Carl, heavens.
can't do that.
So are there, when you're in a break like this, which I don't even believe because I know you're working on another book, but are there characters that start coming to you or that you think, oh, that's interesting to me? Does that happen organically as you're just going through life, or is that really something you sit down and go, okay, now I got to think up some good characters?
Both. I mean, I think
Okay.
they're not only characters, but certain scenes and settings. There are things that pop up in the novels today, and in fact, that even in Squeeze Me, that were snippets of something that I either wrote about for the Herald years ago or really happened. Just a memory I had, a snapshot of it might have been a story that was 400 words, but there's something stuck with me, and I used it. There's a scene in the novel where a boat of migrants comes ashore in Palm Beach County, of all places, in the middle of the night, not far from the president's house, Casa Bella Cosa, and he has a famously strong view on immigrants, and these folks have been smuggled over from Bimini. That happens on an almost too regular basis, and often tragic basis, all up and down the coastline. But what interested me, I thought of it because there had been stories about these boatloads, and everybody scatters, and they're just trying to get away from immigration, get over to the
shadows,
and get in the shadows and get a job. But it's barely a headline anymore. But it's the human drama and that it goes on these voyages. And they had a boat that crashed not long ago, and I mean, those are the sorts of things that you sit, you're not looking, you're not scouring for them, but the scene comes to you organically, the moment comes to you organically. It's the same with characters. I still occasionally, I save crazy newspaper articles. I mean, we have a story in Florida. This guy, I think you probably heard about this guy, was arrested in and I think it was a Target store for they had these giant stuffed animals of the Disney characters from Frozen, and I haven't seen the movie because my kids are all grown, but there's some beloved Disney character named Olaf. And this guy took him down and started humping him vigorously.
No, I didn't hear this.
Oh, and let me just, without getting into details, the encounter was consummated, and the police.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and when the police came, the guy had moved on to another stuffed animal in the aisle, and so he was dragged away, and there was some quote in the story saying to the cops, "Yeah, I got a real problem," and it's like,
you think?
You do. But the point is, now there's something that I would clip out and say, but how could you put that?
You can't make that up.
You can't put it in a novel. It's not even.
And you can't put it in a novel. It's too gross.
It's too revolting for even me. But those are the sorts of things that if you live in a place like Florida, come over the transom every single day.
You'll think of some way to just slightly change that and use it, I'm sure.
I don't think there's any spin on that. That story is, and I'm no huge fan of Disney. I'm no huge.
No, you're not. I work for them, so I'm keeping my mouth shut here.
Yeah, but even I wouldn't. Even that's just too much. So yeah, I don't know. It just I don't. The process I'm not really explaining very well, but it is chaotic in my head. I think you're explaining it quite well. It's pretty chaotic.
We've got to close now, but we did have one last question from Stephen Staniford, who said, "Now that you've retired, how's the golf game?"
Oh, here's the thing. I wrote this nonfiction golf book years ago, and because I'd given up golf for 32 years, which was, and then I decided to go back to it. And my friend Mike Lupa,
you are insane,
told me to keep a diary. And here's what happened is that I wrote the book and all that, and then I hurt my back. Ended up having I didn't hurt it playing golf, but I ended up having back surgery, and I haven't been able to play since then. And so it's giving me. The back pain is horrible, as anybody out there who has it knows. It's wretched, but it is an excellent way to explain why you don't play golf anymore. It's like
It's a good excuse.
It's like a great Larry David. I love to go, but my back is shot. So that's the answer. I haven't played in a few years.
Well, Carl, it's sure been fun speaking to you. I think Jeff will probably jump back on here. The book is Squeeze Me. It is amazing. It's now out in paperback. So those of you who didn't get a copy.
Well, I should mention the epilogue. I did write an extra epilogue for this book that wasn't on.
Well, now you're going to make me get the paperback. That's no fair.
No, here, I'll just show it to you. You don't have to. You can.
How long's the no, I want to read a different epilogue. Come on.
It was after all the crazy crap that happened in January. I felt there was some satirical attention that needed to be refocused. So it's just an extra chapter is all it is.
That's kind of fun. Do they make note of that on the cover or something so that we all buy the paperback?
They did. It says actually with a new epilogue.
Well, great.
Did. Yes.
There you go.
And here's the thing. I'll just tell you this. You'll appreciate this. I did it for free.
Unbelievable. No one. I just wrote an entire book for Disney for free. And I just told my wife about it tonight. And she went, "Wait, you didn't get paid for that?" I've only been working on it for a year and a half. Whole free book. Yeah. They're having me rewrite the entire Kingdom Keepers series because the parts have aged so much. But part of the deal was that I wouldn't get paid for it. So I'm doing it out of love, people. I'm doing it out of love. And with
that is not right. You do have an agent, don't you?
I've got a very good agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we all adore you, Carl. Thanks for your time. I know it's precious, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks. We'll see you on stage.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I hope so. One of these days. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Ridley.